Thank you. Hello. Welcome, everybody. We're here today to remember Bunk and to join our hearts together to give comfort and strength to his family. Mourning is a time that's filled with many memories and emotions, both bitter and sweet. And we're going to begin our service today with the recitations of some psalms and some readings, thus linking Bunk's life with the millennia-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. And one of the things that we learn, I was recalling with the family earlier, is that mourning is the price that we pay for having the courage to love others. For even in our grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. For even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and their warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and also courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. And I'd love to invite our cantor. I'd love to invite our cantor, Cantor Adam Davis, to lead us in the singing of a couple of our psalms in Jewish tradition.
From Psalm 16. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini balemot lechen samach libi vayagel kvodi av besari yishkon levetach Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini bal emot. Adonai is always before me, at my right hand, lest I fall. Therefore I am glad, made happy, though I know that my flesh will lie forever in the ground. Psalm 23. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bino deshe yar bitseni, al mei menuchot yanahaleni. Nafshi eshovev yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo yirara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha shivtecha umishantecha hema yanachamoni taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan taroch lefanai shulchan neged zorerai di shanta v'shemen roshi di shanta v'shemen roshi di shanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, ושבתי בבית אדוני ליאורך ימים. A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God lays me down in green pastures, leads me to still waters, renews my life, guides me in right paths, for that is God's way. Though I walk through a valley as dark as death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table before me in full view of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Adonai forever.
And the child asked, "Tell me of life." And the sage answered, "Life, my child, is a mystery. We do not ask to be born, nor do we even understand the meaning of birth, of creation. We grow and we experience life's pleasures and pains. We love, and slowly, oh so slowly, we come to realize that we have become, that we are. At that moment, we humble ourselves before the mystery of life and quietly say, 'Though I knew not, I've been granted the most precious gift of all, the gift of life.' And the child asked, 'But tell me of death.' And the sage answered, 'Death, my child, is also a mystery. It is the inevitable return of the gift of life, the gift which came free to us. We live as the trustee of that mysterious being, of that unexplainable becoming. Yes, you and I are but the trustees of life. We nurture it, we delight in it, we give of it to others. And at the appointed time we sadly, yet with pride, return it from whence it came. The beauty, my child, is that what we are and what we have become remains long after the gift has been returned. It remains as a precious keepsake with our loved ones who live on. I know that we have here today so many friends of Bunk from our community, but also we have his sister, we have his 4 children, we have his grandchildren, we have his great-grandchildren, and others here today. And so to share some of those precious keepsakes and holy memories, I would love to invite Bunk's granddaughter, Nicole, to share some memories of her grandfather.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. In recent years, I've had conversations with my grandpa about the idea of legacy. He's wondered how he would be remembered and how his presence in our lives might manifest in our memories. After all, he was a multifaceted, multi-hyphenate of a man. From a young age, I saw my grandpa as a hard worker and businessman, working alongside my dad for decades, building Diamond Mattress, which my brother and I grew up running around as little kids to both working out in our early adulthood. He was a fisherman, having taken trips to Alaska, one being a triple generation trip with my dad and brother, catching salmon half my brother's height. He was an avid sports fan, whether watching any game on TV or in person in years past, attending and volunteering to work golf tournaments, going to Jazz games, Real games, Utes games, and even Fiesta Bowl tailgating years ago. He had a University of Utah decorated golf cart in Arizona and dedicated hours to creating his infamous Super Bowl bracket drawn on poster board each year, each line measured with a ruler and color-coded, on several occasions borrowing my Crayola colored pencils or crayons, and markers, but preferably the markers because the colors pop more. He was a talented golfer, accomplishing 3 holes in 1 and winning tournaments in his playing days. He was a veteran, proudly serving our country in the 50s, stationed in California, Texas, North Carolina, and West Virginia. And he was a dedicated man of faith, never one to impose his beliefs, but so proud to share his faith when invited. My earliest memory of this was seeing a menorah in his window next to his front door of the 1500 East home. When asked about it, he was so happy to tell Chase and me, sharing the story of Hanukkah with us and showing us dreidels and teaching us the dreidel song that he had printed on a paper that accompanied them. Chase and I giggled and sang while he smiled. Looking back, that day presented an aha moment because though my parents instilled a level of awareness of that diversity that existed in this world, that was a moment of realization of the diversity within our family. On that note, I want to express my gratitude for Rabbi Spector and this congregation, where my grandpa found such purpose with an incredible community of friends and extended found family, Esther's Garden, and the school. This community's impact on nearly half his life has not gone unnoticed, and on behalf of my family, I want to thank you for the love and welcome you show us today. No place feels more appropriate than here to honor him. Over the last month since he passed, memories of him have flooded my mind. When we were young visiting Diamond Mattress, he always had a 3-pound bucket of Red Vines licorice, allowing us to have a piece. Then visiting him at home, where he had the same Red Vines bucket upstairs in his TV room, telling Chase and I when we'd arrive to go get our piece of licorice before whispering we could each have an extra. But don't tell Mom and Dad, he'd say with a wink and a smile. Sorry, Mom and Dad. We'd run up the stairs, grab our 2 pieces of licorice each, quickly eating one of them before casually walking down the stairs with the other. I remember staying with him for a few days when our parents traveled to Europe, most vividly on a Saturday. We started off by getting breakfast at over-the-counter before we tagged along on errands, picking up his dry cleaning, grabbing groceries, going for an extended drive, all of us in his little Mercedes, Chase in the passenger seat and me in the jump seat with my knees bent and feet on the center console. I think we were just both so happy to be included in his routine. We lived with him for a few months while we were building our home. Each day, Grandpa made breakfast, and we had dinner together most nights. He'd help us with our homework, and we'd put our graded papers, tests, and art projects on the fridge and pantry doors. He would ask to see what I learned at ballet and Chase at karate. He introduced us to Dragon Diner, the go-to place to meet him for dinner on a Friday or Saturday night in the years that followed, and what I insisted on having for my birthday dinner each year. My first job was mowing his lawn on 1500 each. Each mow when I started ended with me apologizing for the lines being a bit crooked, and him smiling and telling me that's exactly how he wanted it to look before hugging me goodbye. As my brother and I got older, going through the growing pains many teens and young adults experience, he was ready to offer advice when invited into the struggles of our little worlds, telling me, "Keep your chin up, kid, it won't feel like this forever." In my early 20s, working in the family businesses, he'd tell me he was impressed with my work ethic, saying, "You are a fox." He would spend his winters in Arizona, so I enjoyed the warmer months when he was back in town. I'd visit him in the garden that he had planted at Diamond Mattress for many years, running out to refill his water and often having lunch together. At 25, I, the deeply sentimental, homesick-prone daughter that I am, decided to move to LA to work in wardrobe styling. And when I told Grandpa, he said it was a big decision, but he wasn't worried because I was meant for big things. He would ask to be caught up on looks I assisted with whenever I visited. I wanted to hear stories about my life, my found family of friends, and my work, always telling me, "I told you, big things," as I'd scroll through the photos with him on my phone. But my time in LA was relatively short-lived because in 2017 I was diagnosed with lupus, and when it came to the point where my health was compromised enough that my ability to live on my own was no more, my parents helped pack up my life and move me home. And it soon became apparent that I would be tagging along to Arizona when my parents escaped for the winter months as we figured out how to navigate this as a family. Upon seeing my grandpa, he gave me the biggest hug while repeating in my ear how sorry he was and the same words from years past. "Keep your chin up, kid, it won't feel like this forever." Looking back at the last 7 years, what became a clear silver lining is how much time I've gotten to spend with my grandpa at this stage in my life, and what a rare experience it can be as an adult grandchild. Whether he'd spend time in the summer with us in Utah or I'd spend winters in Arizona, when we were in the same place, I saw him every day. We shared many breakfasts and most dinners, encouraging me when I cooked to my adapted diet, saying, "Excellent, Nick," after each meal. If we'd eat dinner at his house, he was always proud to grill steaks or make a batch of soup. And he'd do this thing while eating where he would gently smack his hand against my hand at the table and do an exaggerated wink when I looked, just to make me laugh or smile. If I had a rough morning and needed time to myself, or when I was working remotely in my room, unable to join for breakfast, he'd always shout from the end of the hallway before leaving, "I love you, Nick. I'll see you later," before heading out the front door, even if I was in a meeting, which my coworkers always thought was very cute. We found ourselves in a place where we could converse about various topics, like events in the world, no matter their weight or our generation gap, and I appreciated how he always made me feel like my perspective had value. And he would entertain me by asking about movies, which I've always loved, and asking about the recently watched ones, telling me, "More than hearing about them, I like hearing you talk about them." He loved our dog Harley, letting her put his paws on his belly when she attacked him with kisses and on his face and ears, always laughing and telling her "good night" when she was done. He would take her for rides around the neighborhood in his golf cart, or that same Mercedes from our childhood, which he kept parked in our garage, allowing me to borrow it if I ever needed a drive or a moment of independence in Arizona. I was in Arizona with my parents when he was first diagnosed with cancer, and we got to be there when he went into remission the first time and rang the bell, grabbing a celebratory brunch afterward. I saw him teach my mom how to make Yorkshire pudding, and how excited he was when it was a good batch, telling me, "Quick, Nick, take a picture." And on a few occasions, we got to visit with his dear friend Rabbi Spector when he'd traveled to Arizona to visit Grandpa, and he always really looked forward to your visits. My grandpa hasn't always been dealt the easiest hand, especially within the last handful of years, but I think it's impossible to know how any of us would have navigated the cards he had been dealt or the course of his logic. We are all imperfect people living in an imperfect world. Would it be wonderful if we could all acknowledge our shortcomings instead of fear of judgment or disappointment leading our decisions or impulses? Of course. But it's simply not a one-size-fits-all expectation we can place on one another, and I believe we can only hope to do the best we can with the time that we have, and that the good will outweigh the bad. Through the last 7 years, I've had the unique experience of observing him in some of those moments because of the circumstances that brought me back home. These legacy conversations would sometimes lead me to wonder about him and how I would reflect on him when he's gone, not just as my grandpa, but the deep feeling human I've come to know in my adult years. Well, Grandpa, the good has outweighed the bad. Speaking for myself, his legacy will first and foremost be the grandpa he was to me. And I think of him anytime I drive past Dragon Diner, this congregation in Esther's Garden, whenever I buy my red vines at a movie theater, and when I make a recipe that I know he liked, or bake a carrot cake. And through pieces passed down from him that bring comfort, like his diamond mattress jacket, a small picture from his service in uniform, cocktail glasses that once belonged to his Uncle Frank, or greeting cards and voicemails that I've held on to. He was loved and will be so missed, and the void of his loss creates is large, but I'm grateful for our experiences with him over the years and eager to see how our memories of him may start to fill that void over time.
Thank you, Nicole. I'd like to invite Bunk's granddaughter, Abby, to share some words as well.
Thank you. This is my first experience speaking at a funeral, and I don't know if I should be grateful for that or nervous. I feel a little bit nervous today. I wish we were together under different circumstances, but what a blessing to honor my grandfather's life. Last I knew, when I talked to Grandpa, he didn't want a funeral because he told me nobody would come. So take that, Grandpa. I've thought a lot about how we feel the holes left in our hearts when we're experiencing such a loss as this. And I think, as Nicole talked about, we talk about the things we learned from them that we get to keep with us because of their lessons taught to us. When I was sitting at a restaurant with my grandpa about 18 months ago, he spoke to me about some money he had set aside for each of his grandchildren that was going to go to them upon his passing. And I said, Grandpa, why don't you give it to them now so that they can tell you thank you and how much they love you? And he said, because I want to give it to them so they remember me and say that I was good. His greatest desire was that the good would outweigh the bad, despite his imperfections. My grandpa was a generous man. He paid for my mission as a member of a different faith. That didn't cross his mind to not assist me in something that I wanted to do. He paid for me to finish college when I was right near the end and I just didn't know if I could make the last 2 semesters, and he said, "I'll do it." And he just wrote me a check. He didn't write it to the school, he didn't write it anywhere else, but he knew that that's what I wanted, and so that's what he would do for me. He recently did send all of his grandchildren some money, and I think that is such a miracle that he got to speak to each one of them just before his passing. I don't think that that was coincidence. My grandfather was hardworking. As Nicole said, he ran a successful business. Every time I talked to him on the phone, he would always ask about how my husband and I were making money. How were we paying our bills? How were we doing those things? Because he was concerned that that would be his legacy. He wanted his grandchildren and his children to be as equally hardworking and to understand the value of success. He was tolerant of other people. Not always. We're going to get to that in just a second. But he was tolerant of my faith, of other people's faiths, of other people's different opinions in politics and otherwise. He would always sit and talk and listen. When I was in my early 20s, it was common for my friends and family members to be getting married, and it felt like it was taking me a very long time to find my forever partner. And one day I was talking to him on the phone, and he was talking to me about this situation, and he asked how dating was going. And I told him that it wasn't going, and his exact words to me were, "Them Mormon boys are dumb." And I always appreciated that. So my husband, luckily, he's not dumb. Grandpa never thought he was dumb because he actually took the bait, I guess. We both had an understanding of God and respected each other's understanding of him. Grandpa Fox was playful, another attribute I think worth taking into our daily lives as we remember him and honor the memory of him. One year, my younger brother Ethan is obsessed with sauces. This was true when he was 4, and when he is, how old are you now, 34? Still true. Ketchup, ranch dressing, barbecue sauce. It goes on everything. And one year for Christmas, my grandpa, he thought this was so hilarious. He found one of those mega bottles of ketchup at Costco, and he wrapped it in tissue paper and then wrapped it in about 4 rolls of duct tape, and he gave it to Ethan for Christmas. And he thought that was the funniest thing, and it was funny, and it took Ethan a long time to open it, and Ethan was very grateful for his own large bottle of ketchup. When I was a teenager, probably 13 or 14, am I allowed to say a bad word over the pulpit? Okay, thank you. Rabbi knows this story. I wanted to make sure I was okay to share it. When I was about 13 or 14, we were at his house for Christmas. And he had a nice Christmas card for all of his kids and grandkids. And he gave me mine, and my name was spelt incorrectly. And I gave him the hardest time about that. And I said, "The audacity, I have been your granddaughter for 14 years. I can't believe you would spell my name wrong." And I went on and on and on and on, because I don't let things go very easily. And he interrupted my rampage by saying, "Well, from now on, it's going to be shithead if you don't stop." And it was. Every letter that he wrote me on my mission, anything that came in the form of a card or a gift, was addressed to shithead for the rest of my life. And I'm going to miss getting those cards in the mail. My grandpa was frugal. He lived like nobody else, sometimes annoyingly frugal, like nobody else, so that in his later years he could live like nobody else. He was generous because he was frugal, and he could donate the money to various causes, to his grandchildren, to the synagogue, to the education of the next generation. Additionally, perhaps some of the things we keep with us are maybe some of the bittersweet moments, some of our weaknesses, some of his qualities that maybe we wish would have been a little bit better, and so we can move forward with them. In 2023, Grandpa told me his biggest regret was not figuring out how to make it work with my grandmother. He loved his wives thereafter, but he always talked about wishing he could have figured out how to just stick it out. So maybe we learn how to be a little bit better of a partner from Grandpa Fox. Maybe we learn how to love someone the way they need to be loved from Grandpa Fox. Sometimes Grandpa had a really hard time adjusting to the needs of someone around him. It was his way or the highway. All too often, it caused some hurt that maybe didn't need to be caused. So maybe we can learn to be a little more empathetic because of Grandpa. Grandpa loved his family, he really did. But sometimes he had a unique and different way of showing that love that we didn't always understand. He wrote me letters on my mission. He came to my high school graduation. He came to all of my pageants, and he came to my wedding, even though it was in a place that he could not come. He waited outside. But when he got his award, or his recognition, I'm not sure what we call it, here at the synagogue, he forgot to invite us because he said, "I didn't think you'd want to come." So maybe from Grandpa, we learn how to put our family first. And if anyone knows the Fox family, you know that if holding grudges was an Olympic event, we would always qualify. And Grandpa might have been the gold medalist every year. 91 years standing. Because he couldn't and wouldn't, I hope we all learn to let go, to forgive a little more often, to move on from mistakes, from the choices people make that might have hurt us a little bit, so that we might live full and complete lives like Grandpa. Especially let's let go of the little things that matter not. I'll always think of him, as Nicole said, when I eat a carrot cake. When I was addressing holiday cards the other day, I was sad when I saw his address come up and knew that I'll never send another card, or I'll never see shithead on an envelope again. I'm sad to say goodbye, but I'm grateful for all he taught me and all he was to me. Thank you.
Abby, thank you so much. I love your memories and clearly a lot of love you and Nicole both have for him. And I always tell people too that one of the things I love most about the Bible is that when we look in the Bible, and I'll talk about this a little later, is that we see all of our most wonderful people in the Bible were complicated people, and we still love them. And so thank you for that. And by the way, you asked if you could say a bad word. I said yes because they still talk about this. I accidentally once dropped an F-bomb at BYU in front of Elder Cook. And so now I'm going to call my friend Elder Cook and tell him we're even. So that you consecrated our place as well as I consecrated theirs, and we're even now. I'd like to invite Bunk's grandson Chase to share some memories as well.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. I'm going to grab one of these now just in case, so I don't have to rifle for it later. Years ago, about 23 years ago actually, I was assigned a paper in school to get to know my grandfather better, write a biography on him. Some things kind of had to be edited and moved around to make more sense. His childhood was kind of tough. But I think a lot of what is in here still holds true to this day. So, Bunk, who made his mark after being compared to a comic character, remains young at heart and adds a lot of spark to my life. If there was a book containing rules, he would probably break most of them. Although a man of great distinction, I wouldn't put anything past him. He can turn any situation around and bring the best in people. You can always ask for advice, but will never be judged for it. He will never pass the occasion to congratulate someone and give them a full recognition on a job well done. And lastly, his heart is filled with love, and there is a lot where it came from. On June 4th, 1933, Moroni Fox Jr. was born at LDS Hospital in Salt Lake City. He was the son of Moroni Fox Sr. and Mary Frances Hosick. Grandpa was the second born of 3 children. Levon preceded him, and Donald came a few years later. The family struggled early on as his parents married young. Although both were hard workers, they lived in poverty. The frustrations of making ends meet and the pressure of raising a family of 3 were hard to handle. By the time Grandpa was a toddler, his parents were divorcing, which caused Grandpa and his siblings a lot of turmoil and instability. Therefore, neither of his parents were very involved in their children's daily activities. Grandpa had to attend several schools as they were constantly on the move. Needless to say, Grandpa has very few good memories of his childhood. In fact, too few to mention. He spent all his extra time working on the farm, leaving him with very little time for leisure. Suppose there was time left for a game or two, he entertained himself with a game of tic-tac-toe or a game that was simply made up. A paper route allowed him to have a bit of spending money as he never received a weekly allowance. When Grandpa was in his mid-teens attending Olympus Junior High, his constant tardiness got him in trouble. None of it was intentional, as he had the responsibility of taking care of a younger brother each morning. He then hurried to the point of hitchhiking in hope to get to school in a matter of seconds, but was frequently unsuccessful. The tardy bell always got the best of him. Once in school, he enjoyed it. He seemed to like all of the subjects, his teachers, and the camaraderie that he built with his classmates. He only recalled being in trouble once with the gym teacher. Apparently, in the eyes of some, Grandpa wasn't always a great influence. He reassured me that he went about his business every day and seldom did he disobey the rules. But on this day, after being caught running and playing around in the hallways and pestering another student, Grandpa had captured the attention of the gym teacher and was reprimanded for it. They did it the old-fashioned way. He was taken to the gym with the other student in question and made to fight it out wearing boxing gloves and all. Of course, being the smallest of the two, Grandpa lost the match. As Grandpa attended Granite High, he never took interest in running for class president. He slowly detached himself from his studies and had very little to do with sports. Sadly enough, he was still experiencing difficulties at home, which forced him to move out. He found comfort and resided with a friend of his and his family. To pay for his room and board, he had to wake in early hours and work in the bakery. The extra money saved permitted him to buy a 1934 Ford Green Coupe for the amount of $150. His new wheels took he and his high school sweetheart at the time to their favorite hangout, which was Saltaire Pavilion. There they listened to their favorite music and socialized with friends as well. In the last year of high school, Grandpa had no idea in which direction he wanted to go, and the best alternative seemed to join the Navy. He left a girl behind whom he had married 50 years later. He had gone 4 years, and upon his return attended the U of U. He married Dolores Hay soon after and became a proud parent of 4 children: Lanny, Roni, Ernest, and Teresa. As a young man, Grandpa had to work a couple of jobs, which meant spending less time at home. But the children were fortunate to have their mom by their side. He worked very hard to provide for his family. He then helped his father build a mattress manufacturing business and later went his separate way and finally opened a business of his own. He was quite proud of his accomplishments. During my first week of school in elementary, 6th grade, my grandpa, my dad, and I flew to Alaska for an adventurous weekend. The temperature during the month of August in Alaska was much colder than that of Salt Lake. We were layering layer after layer of clothing. Our day would start up by rolling out of bed before sunrise, where in the kitchen Grandpa stood cooking breakfast for all of us. We would then meet with Chick, who was our fishing guide, who would take us down the Kenai River. The amount of time spent on the boat every day would vary on the amount of fish caught daily. Some days we could easily be on the river until sunset. I enjoyed the beauty of nature surrounding me, the company, and the experience away from home. But at one point, I felt a bit homesick, and when Grandpa suggested that I call home, I jumped at the occasion. I had been fine, but for some reason that evening, the hours spent in the cabin with very little to do got to me. As soon as I heard my mom's voice, I bursted into tears. Grandpa was immediately by my side consoling me and reassuring me that we would be home very shortly. He hugged me until I felt better. I often think back and cherish that time spent with him and my dad. His family seldom have the opportunity to have all three generations together. My grandfather might not have had the greatest childhood, but I think that he did remarkably well. He tried to turn the negative into a positive. He didn't go around blaming everybody for his misfortune, but fetched for himself. He's cared for his family and friends, and is not only giving and generous, but never expects anything in return. He enjoyed life to the fullest and was deserving of such. He is a good example of a good and hard worker. He taught me to believe in myself, never cut myself short. But foremost, to ignore what might be said about me, and no matter what, I will succeed. If I had to describe my grandpa by physical features, it would be different than his early youth. Bunk, which some may not know, was a name acquired from a comic character, and as a young mischievous child, he didn't necessarily fall into that description later in life. His blonde hair turned into salt and pepper receding line, which was often covered by a hat or a golf beret. No longer was he of small stature, but quite large. He measured over 60 feet tall and weighed over 260 pounds. He had gotten a little bit heavier in the last few years due to his age, but certainly for a time not because of his lack of exercise. His love of golf was always there. His hazel eyes, hidden behind his tinted glasses, looked down into his golf bag to determine which he'll choose to hit the ball the farthest, having made 3 holes in one in his lifetime. His tan face is covered in part by a well-trimmed beard, but his perfect smile can't be left unnoticed. He kept very active even with slight limp and knee issues. But a golf cart came in handy. He loved golf so much that in the winter months he would travel to warmer weather. But most of all, when I think of Grandpa and would describe him, I would always think of him as loving, warm, caring, and joyful. You could tell just by looking at him and the demonstration in his gestures. For a lot of time, you could hardly detect a frown. That happened a little more in later life, but when you get to reach over 90, I think it's allowed. As far as this mischief, that always stayed. I loved my grandpa very much. Still love him very much. There's been something that I've learned about within the last couple months since his passing that I've found a lot of comfort in, and I think that's relevant, whether it's helping us with our memories or whatnot. And it's the 4 tasks of mourning. We all know the 5 stages of grief. 5 stages of grief we've probably all come through at this time, but maybe we're still working on that. The 4 tasks of mourning are what we take to going forward. The first of those is to accept the reality of the loss, which hopefully after today comes a little bit easier. Second is to process the pain of grief. The third is to adjust to a world without the deceased. My grandpa was a big presence. He leaves a big hole. But, while he's gone, there's always the memories. And the last of those tasks is to find an enduring connection with the deceased while embarking on a new life. I think all of us have been very lucky to know Bunk in some way or another. And just because he's gone doesn't mean we can't have a connection with him still. And I think that's something to remember. So I know he cared very deeply about everybody in here. I don't think any of us wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for that. He cared for his faith. He cared for his family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And that's all I'll remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Chase. Appreciate from all the grandchildren who shared today their memories. We're here today to celebrate the life of a person who became one of my closest friends. And thinking about what I was going to say about Bunk, as both a rabbi and a friend, I talked with his son Ernie, who suggested I write the eulogy that Bunk needed to hear. About every 6 months, I looked forward to a trip to visit Bunk down in Tucson. And in recent years, Bunk showed me with immense pride the jigsaw puzzles he had made. He would work meticulously on them and then have them framed as a complete masterpiece and displayed for all to see his achievement that he had put together these puzzles. Whether at his house or later at the nursing home where he spent his final days, you could see Bunk's artistic designs on display. And in that assisted living center, Bunk even had a table in the common area that was reserved for his puzzles, and the staff wanted to display them around the center for all to enjoy. In many ways, Bunk was like a puzzle himself. There were so many pieces to him, some smooth and easy, and others more complicated. And when put together, though, they made something truly beautiful. This weekend, we are introduced in the Torah to the very first Jews, Abraham and Sarah. And as I mentioned, like our other heroes of the Bible, we read how Abraham was not a person who was perfect, but rather he was complicated. But yet he left an incredible legacy. And Bunk followed in this tradition as well. Bunk's life was not always easy. As Chase mentioned, he had a challenging childhood. And he had heartbreak throughout his life, both romantically and with other people in his life, that he sometimes thought he could trust, who broke that trust. However, when he was in his 50s, he and Ernie went into the mattress business. That, along with side hustles like having a parking lot. I'm not supposed to mention that in case the IRS is watching. Led Bunk later in life to amass a fortune that he had not anticipated. Despite achieving this success, Bunk wanted to maintain a modest lifestyle, dressing, eating, and living the way he had always been. Now, when I first came to Congregation Kolami, I was told that Bunk was our most generous donor, and shortly after I arrived, Bunk came up for a visit. I asked him if I could take him to dinner, and I made reservations and took him to the Log Haven restaurant up on Mill Creek Canyon. Made sure to wine and dine him, getting appetizers, entrees, desserts, cocktails, as Bunk and I talked the night away and became quick friends. Now, I'll be honest, the evening set me back a few $100s. But I figured this was an investment. It was worth it for me and the synagogue alike to cultivate this relationship. After dinner, I was driving Bunk home, and on our way down the canyon, he turned to me and said, "Thanks for dinner, Rabbi. I know you're new to town, so you might not know, but there are actually much better restaurants than this one in Salt Lake City. There's this great diner called Sharon's. It's a greasy spoon in Holiday. But also, there's this amazing place called Crown Burgers. Can we do that next time instead?" Wish he had told me that before. Similarly, the first time I went down to visit Bunk in Tucson, I was excited to eat some amazing southwestern cuisine or Mexican food. And Bunk said, Rabbi, you came all the way down here for dinner to meet with me. I want to treat you to dinner tonight. So that'd be lovely, Bunk. He said, I'm going to let you pick between my 2 favorite restaurants in all of Tucson. Which would you prefer, Olive Garden or Red Lobster? I chose Red Lobster, figuring at least I could order a salmon or something there that I could eat. And while Bunk was very proud of being Jewish, he was not necessarily the most observant Jew out in the world. And when the salmon came, it came Red Lobster style, covered with a bed of shrimp. I told the server that I was so sorry, but I couldn't eat shrimp, and I would need to send my meal back. As the server reached for my plate, Bunk jumped over and grabbed the plate before the server could react and shoveled my shrimp onto his and said, Don't worry, Rabbi, I got you covered. In my conversations with Bunk, there were a couple of common themes. Bunk always talked about how much he loved his friends and his family. He told me about all his grandchildren. And he often would tell me which produce was ready to be picked from Esther's garden. He'd call me at the synagogue to say, I heard that a peach fell on the ground yesterday, Rabbi. Go up there and pick those. So I'd have to tell people, I'm sorry, I got to go up, pick the fruit. And then on my visits to him, before I would leave, he would give me a 20-pound bag of grapefruits from his yard to schlep onto a plane back to Utah with me. Bunk was also one of the more sensitive people I knew. This manifested itself in positive ways with his thoughtfulness for others, finding small gifts to give to them, coming up for my wedding and my rabbinic installation, but also sometimes caused Bunk to be his own worst enemy, being too hard on himself and others, having trouble forgiving moments where he felt slighted, or forgiving himself in situations which he wished he had handled differently. I think Bunk didn't always appreciate how loved he was and what a great person he was because of how hard he could be on himself. It was important for him to leave a legacy. When I asked about why he gave to Cole and me in that first dinner we had together, Bunk said, Rabbi, the synagogue is my home. It's my family. And also the synagogue does a good job recognizing me. I know there are people who say, don't do things for recognition, but damn it, Rabbi, I like recognition, and I like seeing my name on things. And he then made sure that I knew up there in the corner of the wall where it says reserved, that spot was a plaque that he had reserved for himself one day so that his name could continue here. Bunk created for our synagogue the Bunk Fox Scholarship to ensure that every child would get a scholarship to go to religious school, and that no child would ever be turned away from a Jewish education or having a community due to their parents' financial hardship. That was, I think, personal to him because of his own childhood. He helped create one of the most affordable religious school programs in the country. A couple of years ago, Bunk decided to have the scholarship fund not only subsidize the cost of tuition for our students, but also the cost of a full-time professional religious school director. For Bunk, he wanted to make sure that we did not only have the most affordable, but also the best quality education to ensure that we would have another generation of Jewish people and that our synagogue in Utah could be an example to the rest of the country of what Jewish education could be, quality and affordable. In my time here, largely as a result of his generosity, we've seen the religious school go from 90-something students to over 160. In my last visit with Bunk in July, I came into the nursing home to pick him up. The nurses said, be sure to sign him out when you leave. So Bunk told me to bring the car around when we were going out to lunch, and he would walk out to me. I told him, Bunk, we need to sign out. Bunk said, Rabbi, I'm 91. I can do what I want. What will they do? Put me on timeout? I've never signed out. And continued to proudly walk out of the building past the nurses. At the end of that visit, I headed out to the airport. I was flying out of Phoenix, and I was already running late for my flight. Said goodbye at Bunk, and I took off, and got about 10 minutes down the road when Bunk called me and said, "Rabbi, I forgot something. I forgot to have a prayer with you. If you have time, will you turn around and come back and pray with me?" I was already running late, and so I didn't know if I could. But while I thought I was probably going to miss my flight, I decided to go back to sit with my friend. We prayed together and gave each other a long hug. And that was the last time I saw Bunk. But in that moment, he gave me the gift that he always did: being present, generous, loving, and proud of being Jewish. And today, with our 160 students who love coming here, and this being their safe place, Bunk, though he has passed, has a legacy and a memory that is living on and will serve us as a blessing and will benefit those children and their children for the rest of their lives. That legacy is enabling our people to continue our covenant that began with Abraham and that has been maintained throughout the generations, thanks to heroes like Bunk. Zichrono livracha. May his memory be for a blessing. And one of those legacies we have, like I said, it is through our school, and I'd like to invite up the Bunk Fox director of our religious school, Tamara Kipper, to share with us some memories, some words about the namesake of her position here, and also following that, we're going to show a quick video.
Hi, and thank you all for being here. My name is Tamara Kipper, and I am the Bunk Fox director of the Ralph B. Schwartz Religious School. I received this title because of this very generous man who was very kind, spirited, and loved all children. He believed so deeply in the value of Jewish education that he created the Bunk Fox Lifelong Learning Scholarship Fund so that every student in our community would have access to affordable, quality Jewish learning program. Bunk's legacy will live on through all of our students at the Ralph B. Schwartz Religious School, and his generosity will impact our students for generations to come, truly embracing the spirit of L'Ador Vador. Do you want to show the slideshow? So we made this slideshow, and there's kids in the religious school who have messages for Bunk. And it was really, really just heartwarming to hear these messages coming from the students.
so many amazing people who help me and be fun.
I really like my friends.
I like religious school because I like to learn about my ancestors from the past, and I like learning about a different language.
I love going to religious school because I can hang out with my friends and I get to learn a lot.
I love coming to religious school because I actually get to learn a lot I actually get to learn a different language because my teachers at school don't teach me anything that has to do with another language.
I like coming to religious school to study for my bat mitzvah.
I like coming to religious school because I can meet all my friends, have a great time coming here learning and helping others learn.
One reason I love coming to religious school is because of all the amazing teachers.
I like coming to Hebrew school because of the great community that there is.
I love religious school because of all the great friends I made over the years.
I love coming to religious school because I get to see all my friends and my teachers, and some of my friends I don't get to see, but it's still really fun. Thank you for bringing me to religious school.
One reason I love religious school is because I get to learn what I didn't know before about Judaism.
I love coming to religious school because it is really fun and I love learning new languages, and I really like learning Hebrew and it's super fun and I love all my teachers.
I like coming to religious school because I get to learn a new language, see my friends and also make new friends, and also I get to learn about history.
I love going to religious school because I love being with my friends and I love learning the language, because then sometimes I can say some nice stuff to my friends and then tell them and they're like, what?
I love coming to religious school because the teachers are very nice and it's really fun to learn with them.
My favorite thing about coming to religious school is getting to chat with all my friends.
I like coming to religious school to see all of my Jewish friends.
I like coming to Hebrew school because of the people I meet.
I like religious school because I get to hang out with my friends and I get to learn new Jewish things.
Thank you, Bunk Fox, for your generosity. Thank you, Bunk Fox, for all you did for us.
Thank you, Bunk Fox, for being so generous.
Thank you, Bunk Fox.
The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by.
Thank you, Tamara, and of course, thank you, Bunk. I've never been at a place where the children are so happy to be here. As I was watching that, actually, there was one boy on there who really stood out to me because a couple years ago, his father very unexpectedly passed away, and I've met with the family on a Saturday after the father unexpectedly passed away, and I said, I'm going to come to your class tomorrow and tell them why you're not there and explain to them that your father died, and we're going to see how we can support you as a class. And this boy said to me, well, Rabbi, I want to go to Sunday school tomorrow. And I said, well, you don't have to. And he said that that's where I need to be. That's what I need right now. And just knowing the kids on that film, I can tell you that if it weren't for Bunk, several of those kids wouldn't be at our religious school. So in our tradition, we don't really talk about so much, as I was saying earlier, what happens to us after we die. We don't know, but we do know that whatever world it is that does await us is a world without the challenges that Bunk faced in this world. And we have a prayer called the Elmei Rachamim, which means God of compassion and mercy. in which we ask God with compassion and mercy to take Bunk from this world of challenges to that world where he can be at peace. If you're able to do so, I'd like to invite you to rise, but at least rise in body or in spirit.
El male rachamim shochein bamromim hametzeh menucha nechona tachat chanafei השכינה עם קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזכירים את נשמת בנימין בן אברהם ושרה שהלך לעולמו. בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר
God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one Bunk Fox, or as he was known by his Hebrew name, Benjamin ben Avraham Vasara, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, with the holy and pure whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold him close to you forever, so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he find a home with you, and may he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we will remember Bunk. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember him. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember him. For so long as we live, Bunk too shall live, for he is now part of us as we remember him. Turn now to the mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadav yikadash shemerabah, be'alma divrach yirteh v'yamlech malchuteh, v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayeh dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agalav v'zman kariv v'emru. Amen. Yesh me rabba mevarach le'olam omei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemeda kudisha, le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'ne'emata, da'ami ram be'alma v'emru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'emru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, uyaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'emru. Amen. And now as we conclude our ceremony, let me say these words to Bunk's family. Hamachom yenachem etchem b'tol sha'av v'led Zion v'Yerushalayim. I'll ask people in our community to repeat these words in English after me to Bunk's family. May God console you.
May God console you.
With all who mourn.
With all who mourn.
In Zion and Jerusalem.
In Zion and Jerusalem.
And now as our service concludes, I'll invite you to go forth in the pursuit of peace, in the celebration of life, and with Bunk's memory, serving all of us as both a source of inspiration and as a blessing. This concludes our service. Thank you.